Grüß, willkommen in einem meiner Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 19 of my battle series of videos. In this video I'll cover the Battle of JENA-AUERSTAT, which occurred on the 14th of October 1806, with some of the critical manoeuvring occurring earlier. As with my other battle series videos, this is not designed as a specific historical video. It's designed to assist players in creating scenarios of actual battles. As a result, my emphasis is on the units and what they did in the battle, rather than any in-depth analysis of why General X did whatever he was supposed to have done or not done. Let's first look at maps from various different sources. In order to make this useful for figure gamers, I need to know the location of the major formations at each significant point in time, which could be even per hour. One issue I had of written records of the battle is that they do not give you a good view of all the events occurring at a single point in time, instead focusing on one part of the battle or campaign and then going to another later. As a result, maps, formations and times for this video are critical, and getting this data is sometimes more difficult than I would have expected, unless you're dealing with a battle such as Waterloo, which is certainly well documented. This shows the position just before midnight on the 13th of October. You can clearly see how strung out the Prussians were. This may have been unavoidable, as you need about 4.8 kilometres of roads for 10,000 men to march along, although in this case it does seem a little bit longer than I would have expected. This shows the position at 1000 hours on the 14th of October. Both battles began at a similar time, I suspect due to the fog. This shows the position at Jena in more detail. This would probably be the position of the French Corps and Prussian divisions before Napoleon's attack on the 14th. This is a drill down into the Battle of Auerstedt. This is a rather interesting battle, as I did not realise the French 2nd Division conducted such a wide outflanking manoeuvre. I suspect this occurred after the 1st Division had broken through. This is a detailed contemporary map of the Auerstedt area, with the town indicated with a red dot. The initial contact occurred around the red line. This shows another detailed contemporary map of Jena. Red dot shows Jena, the red line is the initial front line. This is a rather interesting map of Jena, showing the position of the opposing forces after several hours of fighting. One thing I did notice about the maps was there seemed to be a large difference in the formation's position well into the battle. I have tried to use the best sources, but you may need to take my maps in the course of the battle with a pinch of salt, because I may have selected the wrong sources or maps. Using a large number of different maps as my source, this is the map I'll be using. Jena is on the right and Auerstedt's on the left. The Prussian edge is at the bottom. Incidentally, this is a template I use to create playing areas for figure gaming at 1 in 16,000 scale. It's a 6 foot by 3 foot playing area at this scale. At 1 in 12,000 scale, it's a more manageable 9 feet by 4.5 feet deep. Let's now look at the opposing forces, specifically the major formations. When I first thought about going over the structure of the various armies, I ended up with about 60 slides showing the structure of the armies down to battalion, squadron and battery level. This is clearly overkill, so I simplified the TO&E for this video. My primary sources was Horsa, but I did make some minor changes to it based on other sources and references. There is a lot of unit swapping occurring, and the TO&Es did depend on when it was supposed to reflect, or in terms of time. If anyone interested in my detailed analysis, you can find it in my Napoleonic TO&E white paper on my IO group site, Kriege. This shows the French army at corps level. You'll notice the French 3rd Corps is one of the 2 largest, which was lucky for the French. Instead of using the commander's name, I'll identify the formation by their corps number, or in this case by its specific type in some cases. I find that using commanders can be confusing, especially if the commander is relatively unknown. For simplicity, I'll be using this kind of formation structure on the map. This represents the corps on the left with their respective division. I'm not including the divisions on the map as they end up making it hard to see anything, just the corps. I couldn't fit all the corps on a single slide, so this is the remaining corps, 7th, and of course the cavalry reserve. For those interested in a little bit more detail, this shows the forces for a set of Napoleonic rules. In this particular case, the old WRG Napoleonic rules. The Guards consisted of a cavalry and infantry division-size formation. The First Corps consisted of 3 divisions and a light cavalry division. The Third Corps consisted of also 3 divisions and a light cavalry division. This shows the all-important and critical Fourth Corps consisting of 3 divisions and 2 light cavalry divisions. The Fifth Corps consists of 2 divisions and a light cavalry division. The Sixth Corps also consisted of 2 divisions and a light cavalry division, and the Eighth Corps consisted, once again, 2 divisions and a light cavalry division. While the cavalry reserve did not play a major part in the actual battle, it was critical in the pursuit and rapid advance into Prussia. It consisted of 2 heavy cavalry divisions, 4 dragoon divisions, and a light cavalry division. The Prussians did not adopt the corps system. Instead, they possessed rather large divisions organised under the commanders listed above. I've indicated each commander as a corps for simplicity. I personally see no specific issue with the divisional structure the Prussians used. Each division was almost a half corps, and while this structure was inflexible, it was certainly not ineffective. As with the French, I'll use the division numbers rather than its commanders, or I'll be using the the division numbers rather than the commander's name. I do find it odd the forces which went north were the same size as the forces that left south. I never realised the Prussians effectively split their army into 2. This shows a detailed view of one of the divisions, the third, which is 11,500 men, and is a rather large division. While it's less than half the size of the French Third Corps, 2 of these formations could in principle be a good match for one large French corps. When the Prussians attacked, one attack did force the French back, but the loss of the C&C and problems on the other flank doomed this attack. It's hard to determine the real reason the Prussians lost so badly, but I strongly suspect it was the higher level command which was the primary cause of this defeat. This shows a simplified formation symbol structure, which I'll use in the video. While the Prussians didn't use the corps system, I've broken it up into larger corps structures. The Württemberg Corps, or Reserve Army, was not involved in the battle, but was later defeated on the 17th. It may have been involved if the Prussians wanted, and its lack of involvement is another example of the failure of high command. Let's go into a little bit more detail, once again using my WRG army list. Brunswick's corps consisted of an advance guard division and 3 standard divisions. The Reserve Corps consisted of 2 standard divisions. Hohenlohe's corps consisted of an advance guard division, a standard division, a Saxon division, and 2 special divisions, the Reserve and the Left division, which were ad hoc formations that were structured for the battle. Ruchel's corps consisted of an advance guard division and a standard division. Württemberg's corps was not involved in the battle. It consisted of a weak advance guard division, 2 weak infantry divisions, and a reserve cavalry division. One issue I had with this scenario was the sizes of the army. As far as I can work out, the Prussians had about 115,000 men in the battle, yet Wiki claims the Prussian forces consisted of 119,000 men, so I'm uncertain where the extra forces came from. If the reserve army up north was included, the number goes up to 131,000 men, but this formation was not close, and the numbers are not too great, so it could not be, or the numbers are too great, so it could not be the reason for this inconsistency. Wiki also claims the French had only 66,000 men in the battle, yet I calculated the number was 166,000 men. I suspect there is a major typo in Wiki, which really threw me for a while, as I spent a lot of time trying to work out if this was correct. Even if you only include the engaged forces, the number was still higher than 66,000 men. And I'm not certainly counting the Guard Corps, and I'm not even counting the Guard Corps and the Cavalry Corps, as they were not engaged, and it's reasonable that they were not engaged and not counted. It was just behind the front line in the battle. Initially, we do need to understand the strategic situation. This shows the position on the 12th of October. By the 12th of October, the French had cut the main Prussian army off from Prussia and the reserve army, putting the Prussians into a very difficult situation. The defeat at Saalfeld was another cause for concern, and the troops, especially the Saxons, were demoralised, particularly with the poor Prussian command. Optimally, the Prussians needed to move north, join up with the reserve army, and then drive down to Leipzig, leaving only light forces covering the retreat. Instead, the Prussians left a very large force behind and only marched north with 6 divisions. To make it worse, the forces left behind were divided into 4 divisions at Jena and 2 divisions at Weimar. The Prussians on the 12th were concentrated apart from the reserve army, but by the 14th they were scattered into 3 parts, and a 4th if you include the reserve army. It's true the French were also scattered, but at any point, as ordered by Napoleon, they could concentrate, and except in unusual cases, they would move very quickly in order to do so. This shows the position at 0900 hours on the 13th of October. The Prussians began moving their 6 divisions north at 0900 hours on the 13th, moving at a very leisurely rate. The French 5th Corps occupied Jena during the 13th of October, possibly in the late morning after the Prussians began to move north. This did cause a halt in the Prussian move north, but the Prussians decided it was a minor affair and then just continued their move north. When the French 5th Corps moved out of Jena, it met the Prussian left flank division and forced it back, allowing room to deploy the French corps outside the town. This shows the position just before midnight on the 13th of October. If the Prussians had not withdrawn and decided to attack the French position in the morning, the French would have been in very serious trouble. However, that was not going to occur. I'm uncertain what path north the Prussians intended to take. The quickest path would be on the main road towards the French Third Corps, yet some sources indirectly indicated this was not the case. I personally feel their intended path was the most logical, and as a result, they moved right into the French Third Corps. I'm also at a loss to why they did not send their advanced guards first, as it was the fastest formation. The 3rd Division was strong and did have a lot of cavalry, but why bother to have an advanced guard formation if it was not in the advanced position? This shows the position at 0630 hours on the 14th. Looking first at Jena, there was a heavy fog in the morning, so Napoleon postponed his attack until 0630 hours. Once the fog had lifted sufficiently, he ordered the attack and the 5th Corps moved forward, pushing back the Prussian left flank division. Moving up north to Auerstedt, the French forward elements at Auerstedt came into contact with the advancing Prussian 3rd Division and at 0630 hours halted. The Prussian brought up the advance guard division and launched an attack pushing the forward French position back. This shows the position at 0830 hours on the 14th. Looking first at Jena, by 0830 hours, the fog started to clear and the 5th Corps found it was itself disorganised and out of ammunition. After some frenzied reorganisation, it formed a defensive position against the initial disorganised Prussian counterattack. After repulsing this, the 5th Corps attacked and pushed the Prussian left division further back. However, the Prussian advance guard launched an attack and managed to push the French back in turn. While the centre was stalemated, on the flanks, the 7th and 4th were moving into position. That is corps. Moving up north to Auerstedt, the 2nd Prussian division had arrived and the Prussians halted to organise a full concerted attack. This was probably an error, as the ad hoc attack by the 3rd and advance guard had some momentum at this point, which was now lost. Between 0630 and 0830 hours, the rest of the French 3rd Corps had arrived and prepared a powerful defensive position, with the halt in the Prussian attack giving it further breathing space. This shows the position at 1000 hours on the 14th of October. Moving first to Jena, by 0930 hours, the 5th Corps launched another attack which resulted in only a small advance, but it soon found itself checked and under local counterattacks. With the 5th Corps in trouble, the forward elements of the 6th Corps under Ney launched a rash attack, which initially succeeded but left the forward elements of the 6th Corps exposed, forcing Napoleon to send in elements of the 5th and 4th Corps to assist it. Meanwhile, the Prussians were beginning to form up a major counterattack, which they launched at 10:30 hours. Moving up north to Auerstedt, by 0900 hours, the remaining French formations had arrived in time to meet the Prussian attack. The Prussian attack was a disaster, with the right flank attacked by the 3rd Division falling apart and the C&C being mortally wounded. and the left flank attack by the advance guards initially succeeding, but soon found itself halted by a fanatical French defence. This was a critical defence. If the advance guard division had managed to break through the French, then the French would have been defeated quite badly. Instead, the Prussians were in a serious position and leaderless. This shows the position at 1100 hours on the 14th of October. First at Jena, the two divisions at Weimar received an urgent message at 0800 hours to come to the assistance of the forces at Jena. These two divisions began to move at 1000 hours and took 4 hours to cover 6 miles to the front line. This was a very slow response and an equally slow move along good roads and by now good weather. At the front line, the Prussian left flank division began to withdraw, suffering heavy losses after fighting for the previous 4 hours. The last Prussian attack in the centre and right had been halted and the fighting then died down. This left the Prussian foot in the open for 2 hours while the French skirmished against them, affecting the Prussian morale and inflicting casualties. During this lull, the French reorganised and prepared their main offensive, as most of the 7th, 4th and 6th Corps were almost in place to support the 5th Corps. The Prussians were now outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Moving up north to Auerstedt, with the CNC dying, one attack having fallen apart and the other halted, a final desperate attack was attempted, which in turn fell apart. The French then attacked on the left flank and pivoting, took the Prussian line in the flank. By 1300 hours, the Prussian position was disintegrating. This shows the position at 1200 hours on the 14th of October. First at Jena, at 1200 hours, Napoleon launched his main attack. The Prussians held until 1300 hours, with a Saxon counterattack on the right forcing the French back. Magnificent attack, actually. Considering the Prussian foot had been under constant skirmish fire for 2 hours and were outnumbered massively, this was an astounding defence and possibly the reason Napoleon thought he was facing the main Prussian army. The Saxons in particular performed extremely well, considering their poor morale only a day before. Moving up north to Auerstedt, by 1300 hours the Prussian line had collapsed and the forward 4 divisions began to withdraw or even rout. This shows the position at 1400 hours on the 14th of October. First at Jena, by 1400 hours the Prussian line had collapsed and all 4 divisions were retreating, although not routing. The Saxons on the right flank were withdrawing in good order and under only minimal pressure from the French 7th Corps. Moving up north to Auerstedt, the 2 reserve divisions formed a new line by 1400 hours, which held against the French, allowing the rest of the retreating divisions to regroup and reform. This shows the position at 1500 hours on the 14th of October. First at Jena, the Prussian 4 divisions were falling back in reasonable good order, but when they met the new Prussian divisions from Weimar, they became confused and disorganised. It was about this point the French increased their attack, causing the Prussians extreme difficulty. Moving up north to Auerstedt, the reserve corps divisions had managed to hold the French, which allowed the retreating divisions to reorganise. While the Prussian king, was encouraged to counterattack, he decided to withdraw in reasonable order. This was a serious error, as the only chance the Prussians had of saving the day was to break through the French 3rd Corps. The French line was wider, which could have allowed the Prussians to use their numerical superiority to greater effect, and the French were no longer in a good defensive position. The decision to retreat sealed the fate of the entire Prussian army. This was the position at 1600 hours on the 14th of October. First at Jena, by 1600 hours the Prussians were in full panicked retreat, aggressively pursued by a significantly superior French force. The Prussians were really outnumbered in this particular case by this time. Moving up north to Auerstedt, the Prussians withdrew in good order. However, when they met the retreating Prussians from Jena, they became again disorganised. The panic was infectious and soon the entire Prussian army was retreating in poor order and under aggressive pursuit by fresh French cavalry. The battle for Prussia was effectively over. This is a battle which spans a rather larger area, so requires rules which can allow you to fight such a battle. There are very few rules which could allow this outside of board games. I normally recommend these types of rules, which would be able to refight the entire battle. The standard three I would suggest are, of course, Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, Napoleonic War or Grosse Schlachten, and Age of Eagles. All three rules focus on providing a historically accurate experience, with the Age of Eagles probably being the most complete set of rules. The only minor issue with Age of Eagle is the scale. Be prepared to deploy a very large playing area or scale down your force mixes and distances, which is never really a satisfactory answer. Other rules which you could also consider are DBN and Blücher. However, these do so in an abstract manner. They are good for a game, but not so good for reproducing a historical battle. Snappy Nappy also fits into this category. There are other options I've not personally attempted, so I can't vouch for how good or otherwise they are, but they are Volley and Bayonet and Marshal of the Empire. As an example, this shows the scenario deployment sheet for Napoleonic War or Grosse Schlachten, with the Prussians at the bottom and the French at the top. The biggest issue with this scenario is victory conditions. For example, what do the Prussians need to do to win, and what does victory look like? I suspect exiting the road in location H would be a key victory objective for the Prussians. Victory for the Prussians is all about surviving the day so they could run away at night and fight another day. As for the French victory condition, taking location J could be an objective. If the Prussians hold this, they can run away at night. If they do not, then they would not be able to do so. The biggest issue with this scenario is that it depends on atrocious command. So it's unlikely the French could do what they did historically, unless the Prussian player was thoroughly drunk or very stupid. Apart from victory conditions, what about alternate scenarios? This battle had so many alternate scenarios for the Prussians, a gamer could easily spend a lot of time exploring all of them. The first would be avoiding the unnecessary battle at Saalfeld, which would give them additional forces. Another would be having the reserve army join the main army, more forces, which gives the Prussians a fighting chance in a battle. Ignoring reinforcements, other options would be operational. Instead of splitting their forces, the Prussians could keep their army concentrated and strike the French when the French took Jena initially. Another option would be send the main army up north and only leave screening forces behind. This may be boring, as the French third would easily be crushed in this particular case. My first exposure to gaming this battle was the old SPI board game shown here. I never liked this because the two parts of the battlefield, which you had to fight separately rather than showing the entire battle using an appropriately larger map. This was possible if using the same scale as the Wagram map with a slightly larger map, or the same scale as Leipzig. I know why SPI went down this particular path, but for me it kind of spoilt the game. As a result, in my creation of scenario, initially for Grosse Schlachten and later probably Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, I'm determined to refight the entire campaign on a single playing area. This makes scenario design more difficult, as the French First Corps would probably move to support the Third instead of slowly moving towards Jena. It's even more difficult when you look at the Prussian options, as no player would repeat the mistakes the Prussians did. In my scenario, I had to start the game at 06:30 hours on the 14th in order to ensure the battles occurred reasonably historically. On the other hand, the SPI board game started early in the evening, allowing the French to deploy their forces. But of course the Prussians, moving towards Auerstedt, were not on the map, as they were in the inter-map transit box, unable to be affected. When you show the entire playing area, the Prussian would make all haste in correcting their mistake before the French attack. I mean, their atrocious position would be really obvious if you could see the whole playing area. We also need to ask ourselves, why was this battle so decisive? The main Prussian army at Auerstedt withdrew in good order initially, and while they did suffer disorder when they met the routing Prussians from Jena, if it was not for the close pursuit by the French cavalry, this could have been resolved. The French kept their cavalry in good condition, so when the pursuit started, it was fresh and highly effective. In simple terms, what happened after the battle was as important as the battle itself. This is probably the key point to consider when creating victory conditions, as a Prussian loss was almost certain to occur, whatever occurred, but how that loss occurred would determine if the Prussian army remained in the field to continue fighting or not. So this completes episode 19 of my battle series of videos, in this case covering the Battle of JENA-AUERSTAT. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.